It's crazy to think that 3 weeks from today, we'll be talking about first round playoff matchups for the Ontario Hockey League. That's how close we are to the playoffs, and it's exciting. And we do have quite a bit of movement on the power rankings this week. So let's dive right into it. It's the power rankings for March 4th, looking at the week that was. Starting off at number 20, it's the Niagara Ice Dogs. They fell one position this week. Once again, Niagara finding themselves at the bottom of the power rankings. This is the first time, though, they've been at the bottom in 5 weeks. They were able to get some points and some wins over the last few weeks, but they've tailed off yet again. Niagara 0-2 last week. They were supposed to play a third game in Barrie Saturday night, but of course that game postponed due to the unsafe ice conditions. The game, though, rescheduled for March 19th. So something to look forward to there between Niagara and Barrie. Niagara 12 points behind Barrie for the final playoff spot in the Eastern Conference standings. They only have 9 games remaining. The math looking pretty tight right now for Niagara to potentially make the playoffs, seeming more and more unlikely. They travel east this week, stops in Peterborough and Ottawa. That's a big game against the Petes because they're trying to catch the Peterborough Petes, who right now are 9th in the Eastern Conference standings. At number 19, it's the Sarnia Sting. They fell 4 positions this week. The Northern Ontario road trip has not been kind for many this season, and the Sting are no different. They went 0-3, outscored 13-8 in those 3 games, so not a kind road trip for them. The Sting, 6 points out of a playoff spot. They only have 8 games remaining, so it's another team that's in a tough spot trying to make the playoffs. Just 2 games this week for Sarnia. They play in London Friday night, and then they host Kingston on Sunday. At number 18, the Peterborough Petes, no change for them from last week. They went 1-1, and that included a big 4-1 win on the road against the Owen Sound Attack. Quentin Page, a big game there, scoring 2 goals at the Bayshore. Not bad for the Kincardine native, as he was kind of playing close to his hometown. The Petes, they are 8 points behind Barrie for the final playoff spot, but the Colts do have 2 games in hand on Peterborough, which makes tomorrow night's game huge for Peterborough. They host the Barrie Colts. A regulation win would go a long way for Peterborough as they try to get into the playoff picture here in the last few weeks. But then after that, they host Ottawa and Niagara before traveling to Brantford. So 4 games this week for Peterborough. It's a pretty busy schedule for them coming up. At number 17, the Windsor Spitfires. They fell 3 positions this week. The Spitfires' playoff hopes took a serious hit last week. They went 0-3, and 2 of those losses were against the Flint Firebirds, who they're chasing for that final playoff spot. At this point, Windsor, they need to win out their remaining 9 games to have a shot at the postseason. Windsor, they are traveling north this weekend. So they're doing the Northern Ontario swing, which is not easy. North Bay, Sudbury, and the Sioux. Those are the 3 stops this week. At number 16, the Guelph Storm, they're up 4 positions. The Storm, they moved out of the basement after going 1-1 last week. That included a shootout win over Owen Sound, and then a closer game than what the score sheet shows against the Saginaw Spirit. Guelph, they're right now 2-6-2 over their last 10 games and have fallen to 7th in the Western Conference standings. This is a team that should make the playoffs. They're 10 points ahead of Sarnia, but they're only 4 points ahead of the Firebirds, who are 8th. So you don't want to finish in 8th looking to face either London or Saginaw in the first round of the playoffs. Not a great matchup if you're a Storm fan. The Storm, they host London Wednesday night before traveling to Sault Ste. Marie and Saginaw to close out the weekend. So a very tough week ahead for Guelph. At number 15, the Barrie Colts. They're up 2 spots this week. Barrie, they played just 1 game. That was a 7-3 win on the road against the Sudbury Wolves. That game, though, had a lot of intrigue considering the bounty situation that's going on right now between the Colts and the Wolves. Despite Keishon Aitchison being held out of the lineup due to the bounty case, they still managed to pull off a great win on the road, although Sudbury looked off, but the Colts, they did take advantage. The Barrie Colts, they were supposed to play 2 games last week, but the game against Niagara on Saturday was postponed due to ice problems at the Saddlein Arena. So that means it's going to be a busy few weeks coming up for the Barrie Colts, who wrap up the season. They have 4 games this week, starting tomorrow in Peterborough. Then they host Mississauga and North Bay before traveling to Oshawa on Sunday. So a very busy schedule to wrap up the regular season for the Barrie Colts. At number 14, the Erie Otters, they're up 2 spots. Erie, they had a fantastic week. They went 3-0 on their road trip through the East Division, And the biggest win was yesterday in Ottawa, where they held on to a 6-5 victory. Andre Molnar had a huge game, goal, and an assist. And with the solid week they had, they've now moved into fifth place in the West. And they play two games this week, both at home against the Owen Sound Attack, who are right behind them by just 1 point. So Erie, if they can get a couple of wins here, that's some pretty good separation over the Owen Sound Attack heading into these final few weeks. At number 13, it is the Owen Sound Attack. They fell one position. It was a rough 3-3 for Owen Sound. They went 0-2-1. This team had such high expectations coming into the year, and they've shown signs of being one of the better teams in the Ontario Hockey League, but it's that lack of consistency which has been an issue for Owen Sound. Colby Barlow continues to light the lamp for the Attack. He's now tied for first in the league for power play goals with 15, and he has points in 6 of his last 7 games. So Colby Barlow trying to do everything he can to push Owen Sound into the playoffs on a positive note. The Attack, they host Kitchener on Wednesday before playing 2 on the road against the Erie Otters. At number 12, we have the Mississauga Steelheads. They fell one position. It was a decent week for the Steelheads. They went 1-0-1, and it was a pretty dominant win on the road against the Windsor Spitfires. They won that one 6-1. Adam Zidlicki, fantastic. 2 goals, 2 assists in that game. The Steelheads, they host Brantford for a school day game on Wednesday before visiting Barrie and Ottawa. At number 11, we have the Kingston Frontenacs. They fell one position this week. Things were looking up for Kingston, but then they went 0-2-1 last week, so not ideal, although they kept things close against Kitchener before losing in overtime, so they did get that point at the odd. The Frontenacs still looking to clinch a playoff spot. They only need 4 more points to do so at the time of recording, so I think it's pretty likely that we'll see Kingston clinching a playoff spot this weekend, unless they just go into a funk and lose a few more games here. It won't be easy, though. They do have a 3-3 coming up, all on the road. Stops in Saginaw, Flint, and Sarnia. At number 10, it's the Flint Firebirds. They went up 3 positions this week. The Firebirds, they had a big week. They went 2-1 with those wins coming against Windsor, which pretty much puts them into takes Windsor out of playoff contention with those 2 wins. So great job there by the Firebirds. Looking at the standings, Flint, they're 5 points back of the 5th place Erie Otters in the West. And with their recent play, it's still very possible they can climb up enough in the Western Conference standings to avoid a matchup against London or Saginaw in the first round. But then you still have Sault Ste. Marie or Kitchener. So you just got to pick your poison, it seems like, right now for the Flint Firebirds. But they are putting on a good show as they move forward. Simon Slavacek had a great week for the Firebirds. 2 goals, 3 assists for 5 points in 3 games. And for Flint, they host Saginaw Wednesday before heading to Kitchener and then host Kingston. At number 9, the Brantford Bulldogs. They dropped down 2 positions, but I don't let that fool you. This Brantford Bulldogs team, they continue to play really good hockey. They were just passed by 2 teams, simply as that. The Bulldogs 1-0-1 last week. They fell just short in an overtime loss against Saginaw. This team now points in 9 consecutive games. It's been unreal. They're now 2 points ahead of Sudbury for first in the East. I think this team is better than what the power rankings show. That's just my opinion. It's just the formula I've come up with, and it just puts them here into this position. Brantford is a really good team. You can't take them lightly. And they play in Mississauga tomorrow for a school day game. And I'll do a video on the Brantford Bulldogs if they can get a win or at least a point to extend their point streak to 10 games, because it's fascinating what Brantford has been able to do, exceeding many expectations. The trade deadline, it looked like maybe they were selling, but Zachary Lavoie has been a huge pickup for Brantford when they picked him up from Niagara. So after they play that game in Mississauga, they then host Oshawa and Peterborough. And that Oshawa game could be a battle for first in the East Division. At number 8, it's the North Bay Battalion. They are up 1 spot, and it was a dominant showing by the Battalion last week. They went 2-0 against teams they should beat in the Sarnia Sting and the Niagara Ice Dogs, but both of those games could have been trap games. It's easy to overlook teams that are lower in the standings, and that wasn't the case for North Bay. Pedal to the metal, and they got the victories that they needed, outscoring their opponents 15-5. Anthony Romani now 95 points on the season, which is second best in the OHL, while Dalen Wakely fourth with 87 points. So North Bay, they could be looking at 2 players that'll hit the 100-point mark by the end of the regular season, which is pretty fantastic. The Battalion, 2 points out of first in the Central behind the Sudbury Wolves. And they do play host to Windsor Thursday before going to Barrie and then taking on Sudbury Sunday afternoon. So that's a big matchup coming up there between the 2 Highway 17 rivals. At number 7, it's the Kitchener Rangers. They're up one position. It was a big week for them. They went 2-0. Both of those wins coming in overtime, though, against London and Kingston. Carson Rakoff scored both overtime winners. And the game winner last night against Kingston was his 50th goal this season, which is a great accomplishment, hitting that milestone. The Seattle Kraken prospect continues to get the job done offensively for Kitchener. It's unlikely the Rangers catch London for first in the Midwest Division. They're 12 points back with 8 games remaining, but they're still within striking distance of the Greyhounds, who sit third. They're right now 4 points back of the Sioux. Kitchener, they do travel to Owen Sound Wednesday night before hosting Flint, and then they go back to London to battle the Knights at Budweiser Gardens. At number 6, the Sudbury Wolves, they fell one position this week. I did a video last week kind of touching on how the Wolves look off right now, and that trend just continued last week. They went 1-2, although they put away the Sarnia Sting 10-3. So that's a game they should win. But then they also suffered losses to Barrie and Oshawa. The offense, we know they can be potent, but they're just, you can't keep outscoring your problems. And that was the situation they found themselves in against Barrie and Oshawa. Zachary Giroux, Evan Conyon, both out due to injury, while Chase Coughlin suspended 4 games for a spearing incident at the game against Barrie last Wednesday. So something has to give the Sudbury Wolves team. 2 points ahead of North Bay right now for first in the division, 2 points back at Brantford for first in the conference. The Wolves host the Sioux Wednesday night, so that's going to be a tough game. Then they take on Windsor before going to North Bay on Sunday. So this is a Sudbury Wolves team. If they're serious about clinching the division, they got to get the points. They need to battle strong and maybe play a little more defensive-minded against their opponents. That's just something I'm seeing. This team, they can score. It's just keeping the pucks out of the net. And I know a lot of people are focusing on the goaltending situation, but with all 3 goaltenders having some struggles, you kind of have to wonder, is it the systems? Is it the defense? Something's got to give. And for the Sudbury Wolves, if they want a deep playoff run, they got to figure it out fast. At number 5, it's the Ottawa 67s. They fell 2 positions. Ottawa 2-1 last week. That includes a 4-3 win in overtime against Mississauga, where Henry Muse scored the game winner. He had 2 goals in that game. Ottawa still very much a threat in the East. They're 7 points out of first, but it might be unlikely they win the division, seeing how both Brantford and Oshawa have been playing of late. Ottawa, they started the week with a 2-game road trip. They're in Peterborough and Oshawa before ending the week at home against Niagara. At number 4, the London Knights. They dropped 3 positions for the first time now in 8 weeks. The London Knights are not the top team in the power ranking. Last week, London, they went 1-1, started with a loss at home against the Oshawa Generals, where Jacob Oster stole the show. Then they lost in overtime to Kitchener before winning against the Flint Firebirds. So this Knights team, they're more than likely going to win the Midwest Division. Easton Cowan, red hot for the Knights, 29-game point streak, I believe he's at. He has 83 points in 47 games this season. Cowan is getting it done. And then you've got Denver Barkey, also in the top 5 in points with 87. So things are still looking really good for London, despite not being first in the power ranking. So I know it's tough. I'm sure if you're a Knights fan, your team is right now first in the league, but here on the power ranking, just with the way the week went with everybody, they're at number 4. The Knights, they travel to Guelph this week before hosting Sarnia and Kitchener. So there's still a chance that we'll see London back at number 1 before the end of the regular season. At number 3, the Sioux Greyhounds, they fell 1 position this week. The Greyhounds, they had a decent week, 1-0-1. They fell just short against Oshawa and then cruised to a 7-3 win over Sarnia. The Sioux still trying to catch Saginaw for first in the West Division. They're 7 points back. This team riding a 5-game point streak. They're 7-2-1 over their last 10 games, so not too shabby. They travel to Sudbury on Wednesday before hosting Guelph and Windsor. At number 2, we have the Saginaw Spirit. They're up 4 positions. I said it last week, it wouldn't be long until we see Saginaw back in the top 3, and here they are. The Spirit, they went 3-0 last week. That includes a big win in Brantford. Zane Parekh scored the overtime winner in that game, and for him, he's got 30 goals on the season. And remember, Zane Parekh's a defenseman, and this is something that we don't see too often from draft-eligible defensemen. He is rewriting the history books with the Saginaw Spirit and with the OHL. The Spirit, they're riding a 4-game winning streak and just 1 point behind London for first in the Ontario Hockey League. So this team is legit. They're in Flint Wednesday night before hosting Kingston and Guelph. So at number one, we have a brand new team, the Oshawa Generals. They're up 3 spots, and what an outstanding week for Oshawa. 3 games on the road against London, the Sioux, and Sudbury. 3 very good teams in the OHL, and Oshawa was a perfect 3-0. They needed overtime in the win over the Greyhounds, where Callum Ritchie was the hero in that game, and Jacob Oster was unreal in the game against London. He made 37 saves on 41 shots. But Oshawa, right now, third spot in the Eastern Conference. They're 3 points behind Brantford for first in the Eastern Conference. And now that the Connor Lockhart situation has kind of gotten behind them, they seem to have found their rhythm like what they had back in January, which is a good sign if you're an Oshawa Generals fan, because this is a talented group. Now that Jacob Oster is showing that he can be one of the strongest goaltenders in the league, this Oshawa team could give anyone a run for their money. We've seen that so far this season. Now they've got wins against Saginaw, London, the Sioux, Sudbury. They've been beating some of the top teams in the league. So if you're an Oshawa fan, you've got to be wondering, why not us? And we'll see if they can continue this momentum. The Generals host Ottawa tomorrow night before going to Brantford, where first place could be on the line. And then they host Barrie on Sunday. So that's the power rankings for this week. Let me know in the comments section down below your thoughts on the week that was, maybe some teams that are surprising you, and maybe your predictions going forward. Who do you think wins each division when the whole season is said and done? Love to see the interactions. Thanks again for tuning in. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.